Are you wondering if you should invest in a planer, or if you have one already, whether or not to get a helical cutter head for it? Then this video is for you. I'm going to cover the advantages and the disadvantages of a planer and a helical cutter head so that you can make an informed decision on what to or not to invest in. Stick around and check it out. All right, I'm going to cover a lot in this video, so I'm going to put some timestamps in the description so you can skip ahead to the parts that you care most about. Now, what I'm not going to do is show you step by step on how to change one of these out because there's plenty of videos already on YouTube that show you how to do that. With that being said, let's jump right into it. Now, a planer helps you make one side of a board perfectly parallel to the other side of the board. You can use it to make a finished side if you're using unfinished wood. You can also use it to reduce the thickness of your material without having to resaw it on the bandsaw or the table saw. And that's why they're also called thickness planers. Now, I've had this planer for about 7 years now, and the blades have seen better days. They all kind of have nicks on them, which leaves streaks in the wood from when I put boards through. To get rid of them, I have a few options. I can run them through the drum sander, I can hand sand them, or I could sharpen my blades. And I hate sharpening blades. Either way, I'm losing efficiency, and I hate losing efficiency even more than I hate sharpening blades. Enter the helical cutter head to solve all of my problems, or most of my problems. So what's the difference between the two? I'm glad you asked. First, we'll go through what a straight blade is. The straight blade cutter head has 3 straight blades that have blades on either side of them so you can remove them, flip them, and reuse that blade before you have to sharpen them. So at least you get to use each one twice. Now, a straight blade cutter head will rotate within the planer and all of the blade will come into contact with the material at the same time. It rips away material as it comes into contact with it, which sometimes can cause gouging if you're working with very rough material or if you go against the grain. Now, that has 2 problems. One is that you actually gouge your material, but 2, it could clog your dust collection as well. Now, these blades are really prone to nicks, and when you get one, it can really impact your cut quality, which then requires more time sanding to get a smooth finish. Now, I mentioned I hate sharpening, and I hate sharpening all blades, chisels included, but when you have a blade this long, it's even harder to sharpen these blades. So I just want to avoid it altogether. And no one wants to stop in the middle of their project to sharpen blades. Okay, so let's talk about the helical cutter head. Now, in contrast to how a straight blade rips the wood, a helical cutter head will actually shear the wood, which means it comes at the wood at an angle, just like I'm showing you here with this chisel. It makes for a much finer cut and cleaner shavings, which means no clogs in your dust collection. Now, here's the real beauty of the helical cutter head. It comes with 4-sided blades. So when you get a nick in your blade, you just rotate it 90 degrees and you're back in business. And you can do that until you use up all 4 sides before they need to come off and be sharpened. So what are the pros and cons of the helical cutter head? It shears versus tearing the fibers, so there's better dust collection, which means that they'll last longer than straight blades when you can rotate them and keep trucking. You don't have to sharpen your blades every time you get a nick in a blade, and you don't have to sharpen the entire length of the blade because they're small blades. It's actually a lower cost over time, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Some of the cons, however, are that it has a high initial cost, it takes a long time to change out the cutter heads, and there is a higher power draw. So if you're in a house that has finicky power, then that's going to be a problem for you. Okay, now that I've talked about each kind, let me get this one in the planer and put it to work so I can do a side-by-side comparison. Now, I put a lot of different kinds of wood through this thing to test its abilities against different densities. Everything from pine to Padauk and Purple Heart. Nothing bogged down these blades, and the cut quality was consistent across all types of woods. Now, there are a lot of things that I could compare here, but I'm going to focus on the 3 that I care about the most: the quality of cut, efficiency, and price. So first, the quality of the cut. Here's a side-by-side of each one, and you can see it's a lot better with the helical head. I had some nicks in my straight blades, so the results are a little skewed, but even when the straight blades were new, I still didn't get this nice of a cut. The helical head cut gets me to almost 120 grit, which saves me a ton of time in sanding. And I actually tested it. I also noticed a lot less snipe, but that really has more to do with your outfeed tables than it does your blades. So yes, you can sharpen your straight blades until they are scary sharp and possibly achieve the same quality of cut, but that's just a lot of work that I don't want to do every time I get a nick on my blade. So for me, the helical cutter head wins out on the quality of cut category by far. Now, speaking of not having to do something you don't want to do, let's talk about the next category, efficiency. Now for me, not having to sharpen those long straight blades makes the helical cutter head well worth it. It's much more efficient if you get a nick in the helical blade because it takes about 5 minutes to open up your planer, loosen the blade, turn it 90 degrees, and then tighten it back up and you're back in business. And the version that I bought even has numbers on each edge so you know how many times you've already rotated it. Plus, those carbide blades on a helical head planer last about 10 times more than on the straight blades, so you'll have to do that way less often anyway. Now there is one area where I would say that the helical cutter head has a major disadvantage in the category of efficiency, and that's changing out the cutter head. It took me a really long time to do it simply because you have to make sure all the blades are off, then insert the cutter head, then individually put all of the blades back on. But once it's installed, you're completely good to go. So it's just a one-time upfront time investment, but it can take a while. I'll put a link in the description to the video that I used to swap mine out, so you don't have to go looking for a good one. Regardless, the helical head still wins out by a long shot. One more thing on efficiency. With a helical cutter head, you do way less sanding because with a helical cutter head, the board came out at about a 120 to 220 level of smoothness already. And in many cases, that's all I need. That's an immediate increase in shop efficiency. And plus, I don't have to do something that I really don't like to do anyway. So it's kind of a win-win. So you save time, and time is money, which is the next category, price. Now, if you consider you have 4 sides to each blade, you have to replace the blades much less often than you would with a straight blade. Plus the one I bought came with extra blades too. So you have to estimate how long you think it'll take you to go through your straight blades and then compare that with the upfront cost and then replacement costs of your helical blades. Now, although I have not done the math, remember I don't like doing math, my gut tells me that in the long run, having helical blades will last me a lot longer and therefore save me a lot more money. So consider the fact that you don't have to sharpen your blades nearly as long and you don't have to do nearly as much sanding. You have to ask yourself, what's more important to me? Saving money or saving time? And remember, time is money. Now, if you really wanted to nerd out on this, you could figure out how much time you save in terms of your hourly wage and figure out how many of those hours it would require for you to buy a helical cutter head, and then after that, you're saving money. Yeah, you're better than me if you do that. So final answer, a helical cutter head loses on the upfront cost, but wins by a long shot in the long-term category. All right, so what's the final verdict? Should you get a planer or not? Well, I hate making blanket statements yes or no because everybody's situation is different. I would rather tell you if you're this kind of woodworker, then yes, you would probably want to get a planer. Or if you're this kind of woodworker, then you probably wouldn't. So who would I recommend get a planer? I would say that if you're serious about doing woodworking for more than a hobby, if you want to do very precise work or fine woodworking, if you need to dimension lumber more than every once in a while, or if you just want the convenience of being able to dimension lumber quickly, then I would recommend you get a planer. All of that, of course, is if you have the money for it. And if you can't afford the upfront cost of this item, I recommend you build projects and save up for it so you can pay for one later. You'll find that you become a lot more efficient once you do have a planer. So who wouldn't I recommend a planer for? If you're just a weekend warrior, if you don't build super precise projects, or if you want to buy pre-dimensioned lumber. And of course, if you can't afford it, then I wouldn't recommend buying it just yet. Okay, so let's say you have a planer, but you're just wondering whether or not you should get a helical cutter head. Well, most of the same criteria apply. If you just do this woodworking thing on the side, if you don't mind sharpening blades, or if you can't swing the price, then a helical cutter head is just not for you. However, if you're trying to maximize efficiency, want to cut down on production time, want to save money in the long run, can afford the upfront cost, or if you hate sharpening blades as much as I do, then I would recommend that you pick one up for yourself. Well, I hope that answers it for you. I'll put links in the description for the planer that I use and the helical cutter head that I use, both of which I highly recommend. If you have any additional questions or want clarification on any of the information that I provided in this video, go ahead and put those questions in the comments below. I try to answer each and every one of them. And if you like this video and want more product reviews, put that in the comments as well. Otherwise, I've got another video queued up right here for you. That's it for this video. We'll see you next time.